I'll try to stay within sight of the camera, but I like to wander. So my name is Andrew Kalat, as introduced. I'm not going to give you a whole long bio. I'm an InfoSec guy. That's all that really matters for this talk. This talk isn't so much about me. This talk is really about Michael Hamelin. How many of you knew Michael? I know he was very well known by the industry. Wow. Decent chunk, but not everybody. So for those who didn't know Michael, he was very well known and very active in the information security community. And we'll get into all the details, but that's really who I want to focus on today. And so a couple of upbeats. There will be no cyber in this talk whatsoever. No cyber. Aside from that disclaimer, there'll be no more C words. All right. Warning, this is not a fun talk. This is a difficult topic. There will be difficult pictures. There will be difficult things to talk about here, but it's important. We will try to keep it light. We will try to not stay in a bad place at the end of this talk, but I have to take you on a journey. The point is that if you don't empathize and sympathize with this topic, what I have to tell you won't resonate. So I'm intentionally going to mess with your emotions. I apologize in advance, but it's important. So, other thing I want to say, apparently I've got some feedback over here. I worked with Michael's widow, Beth, and she gave her full support and input on this talk. So in no way am I trying to do anything other than honor Michael and his life and also share important information. And I would not have done this or approached this without Beth's approval. Okay, so who are we talking about? So Michael and Beth, married many years. Michael, 43, both brilliant people. Beth, for instance, is a scientist at the CDC. Not exactly, a dumb person. And that matters in this talk. She's brilliant. Michael, also brilliant. He used to work on everything from nuclear physics to working his most recent job. He had just taken his first CISO role for Green Sky Financial. And he'd done all sorts of things in between. So a brilliant guy. He traveled the world. He traveled extensively. He'd done a lot of amazing things with his career and his life, and was well known by many people. He was part of the Genshoto group, which is the first capture the flag, not first, sorry. They ran the capture the flag competition at DEF CON for many years. And were so successful before they ran it in winning it that they got asked to run it. So pretty well known. And I should have said this up front. I do apologize. This is a bit of an emotional topic for me. So I'm going to try to be numb throughout this, but if I stumble a little bit, I apologize. Also, I've got a lot of notes that I'm going to reference over here, so I apologize if I break eye contact with you. I know it's unprofessional during a talk, but there are certain specific keys I need to hit. And as I promised Martin, there's very few walls of text slides, very few, but a couple, mainly for reference. So what happened? It was Sunday, December 28th. Michael and Beth were in Texas visiting family for the Christmas holiday. They were driving along I-20 to see a friend. Somebody going the other direction on I-20 either fell asleep or went unconscious, and in essence, because they were unconscious, lost control of their vehicle, came across the median through the wire, and hit their vehicle head on. Michael and Beth were in a Nissan Rogue. The other person was in a Honda Accord. For all intents and purposes, Michael was declared at the scene and had very little consciousness after the accident, if any. I want to give you an idea of what this accident was like. Yes, this is a shocking picture. But I'm trying to get through to you guys that this is real and that this could happen to any of us. That was Michael's vehicle. This was the other vehicle. It was a front offset collision. Apparently, Nissan Rogue doesn't do so well with those. In the immediate aftermath, this was in Clyde, Texas, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And Beth was awake, but she had sustained a broken ankle, a deep gash on her arm, lots of bruises, lots of cuts. They had to extract her and Michael from the vehicle, and she was flown by helicopter to a hospital. The problem was nobody knew what had happened. And here's an interesting point, one of the first points that kind of matters for us. We rely on these little guys to contact everybody and to know our phone numbers. In this instance, and what I imagine would happen in most instances is, Beth, when removed from the vehicle, lost all of her stuff. Even if any of it survived the crash. She didn't have a phone, she didn't have an iPad, she had nothing. So here she is in a hospital in Texas. Nobody knows she's there, and she doesn't have a good way of getting a hold of anybody after this horrific incident just occurred. Fortunately, their friend, Gil, was expecting them. And Gil, who is also an InfoSec guy, happened to have set up with Michael the Find Friends capability on the iPhone, which I used to stalk my girlfriend. He used it to figure out where Michael and Beth were. And he started checking, and he found that Michael's phone was on, but it was sitting on the side of the road in this weird part of I-20 where the accident occurred. He kept checking it, it wasn't moving. And he kind of just got the sense something was wrong, so he actually started calling the police in the area. And interestingly, the police kind of confirmed to him, a random person calling, this has happened, and this is how we found where Beth was. Meanwhile, Beth had no contact info of any of her friends or family. She had family in Texas. She was able to basically tell them about a website that her brother had up and running that had a phone number on it, and this is on a Sunday. They called this phone number, and fortunately, her sister-in-law was there, and that's how she started getting a hold of family. But the problem was, she didn't have any other contact info. So once Gil got to the hospital, he brought with him another iPad. And here's another good part of the technology. She was able to get online and look through her contacts online and then start reaching out to friends and family. But again, without this technology, I mean, when I was a kid, we had memorized everybody's phone number. Nowadays, we don't memorize anything. So it's an interesting concept. So meanwhile, they're in Texas. They live here. That's probably a key point. They're traveling, they're visiting vacation. Their car's in Park and Fly. So one of the first things they needed to do was get the car out of Park and Fly. This is actually something I helped with. I started calling Park and Fly, called their local office, called the regional office. They didn't know what to do. And this is going to be a common theme. Very few companies have a process or a procedure to deal with these incidents. They don't know what to do. And so, like most customer service reps, they blew me off. What finally worked was tweeting out, hey, Park and Fly social media account, I'm trying to retrieve my dead friend's car. Will someone please call me? I got a call within a couple of hours, and they happily worked with me to get the car. Now, good on them, they actually didn't charge at all for the stay. And they were very good once I got their attention. But one thing that I've found through this process is that a lot of companies don't have a procedure or process for this. And one thing we found as well is that, we'll talk about this from a social engineering aspect in a bit, there's a lot of confusion when these things happen. I know everybody's bummed out right now, I'm sorry, it'll get better. So let's talk about Michael's IT footprint. And here was the fundamental problem. And I mentioned earlier, Beth is brilliant, and she is. But she's not an IT person. Michael was an uber IT person. You're going to see some pictures of his gear in a minute. And because it's his hobby, like most of us in here, he handled all of the IT for their family. Now, here's the problem. That put Beth at a severe disadvantage in terms of dealing with this problem after Michael suddenly was gone. We're going to talk about the recommendations. So to give you an idea, Michael had just about everything you could think of from an IT footprint. Gmail, he had over 10 personal domains set up that he was hosting. He had co-location servers going. He had a bunch of stuff going at his own house. He had everything Apple ever made set up and running in his house. I'm pretty sure half of the stock price of Apple is because of Michael. And he was doing side businesses. And I was one of Michael's closest friends, and I didn't know half the stuff he had going on. So this talk really is about how do we figure this stuff out? And more importantly, I think, how do we help our loved ones deal with this unfortunate circumstance if it happened to us? So to start to untangle this, once Beth was recovered and came back from Texas, we were trying to figure out what to do and how to get her back online. And this was as fundamental as she didn't even necessarily have access to the Wi-Fi. I mean, unless she had a pre-configured device. But she lost a lot of her devices, so she's got new devices. She didn't know the Wi-Fi password. That's no fault on her. But I'm sure a lot of you folks in here, if you have a partner and they're not into tech, you probably set all this up. You know, so this isn't uncommon. So it went so basic as she had a neighbor nearby come over and reset the WAF back to default so she could at least get back online at the house. Fortunately as well, Michael, unlike a lot of people today, kept paper records of his bills. If he hadn't done that, it would have been very difficult for Beth and others to figure out what Michael was up to, because we traced a lot of this back through credit card bills. But a lot of us do online billing today and online receipts and all that sort of stuff. So it's very difficult to find this stuff because keep in mind, most all this is going to your email. And so we're going to talk about how difficult it was to get back into email, especially if it's Google. Google is incredibly difficult to get back into. So we're going to talk about that. The other upside of this is that Beth was on most of the accounts, and Michael did make sure of that. But like most couples, they split duties in their household. They had different areas of strengths and weaknesses, and this has nothing to do with gender roles. It just has to do with Michael did all the IT stuff because that was his gig. But it put Beth in a bind in this circumstance. Michael also had a bunch of boxes at a colo and was hosting a bunch of stuff. And we weren't even sure what's there. So first of all, keep in mind that colos prohibit access to people who aren't authorized. So the first thing we had to do was have Beth reach out to them and say, hi, this is weird, but my husband just died, and he's got a bunch of boxes there. We got to come figure out what they are. And like many of the things that we encountered, they had no process or procedure for this or knew what to do. The upside is they believed Beth, which is helpful. And she got me authorized as a person to come visit. So, the Colo, by the way, is Colo Blocks. I do want to thank them publicly because they did a great job in helping us figure this out and gave us all the help we needed. They're up just off of Cobb Parkway at Spring, if you ever have a need for a Colo in that area. So what we found was Michael had 5 boxes up and running in the Colo. And that's pretty much all I knew going in. And because I'm lazy or efficient, I took pictures, right? And this is the front, this is the back, a lot of stuff going on. Now, for all you IT folks, you're looking at this going, yeah, no big deal. But imagine if you don't know IT, and you walked into this, and you're like, I have no idea what this is or where to even start. Fortunately, Beth knew to reach out to some people like myself who could help. But imagine if your partner couldn't. There are things you can do to help them. So again, being lazy, I started figuring out, okay, what's on these? So we grabbed the crash card. Fortunately, all these guys had VGA. Plugged it in, started getting a screen up to see what they are. We knew we had 5 boxes. We knew we had 10 active IPs. Found out he had 3 ESX boxes and 2 Linux boxes. All different versions, because why standardize? Yeah, hey, that was you, not me. So again, because I'm lazy, I just took pictures. But what I started capturing was what versions, what flavors, what were these things. Because as most of you are thinking, well, this isn't so bad. We can create boot CDs and reset root, right? Right? And that was a great idea until we hit a little point later. Bingo. So various different flavors. Here's ESX3i, 3.5. By the way, one of these, I can't remember which one, here we got again 3.5, here we've got CentOS 5.1, here we've got ESXi 5.0, so we were all over the map on what versions he had running here, much less what was on them. So once I took all that back, I made the boot USBs and the boot CDs, and had to do a cold boot on these guys, which is dangerous, but what else am I going to do to reset root so I could get in to see what was going on? One of these, by the way, ESXi 5.0, they decided to be more secure and said, nope, sorry, you can't do that officially. The only official way is to reinstall the host OS. There are some unofficial ways to get past this. You can Google for them, which I did, but it's, could break stuff and is dangerous. But most of these were easy. And when I got in and found this, I found that he had a bunch of different guest hosts running, because why combine functionality when I can put them on multiple guest hosts? So we had one host that was just DNS. We had one host that was just email. We had one host that was just Apache. And then a couple different web servers spread out. Started figuring out what was out there. What we found as well, and this was a huge find, was we figured out where he had registered his domains. And fortunately for us, he had registered all of them in one location. If he had spread them out, this would have been really hard. And Beth discovered this from a credit card bill. Now again, keep in mind, this might only bill once per year. So in the meantime, we're lost. Fortunately, Paper Record found it, knew it, could get into it. The other interesting thing that I'll mention now is that most of the time credit card statements don't have the full credit card number. And most of the time when you're calling these services, they want the full credit card number as a verification of your account. We didn't have that. But what I'll tell you is when you play the "my husband just died" card, it helps. People will usually bend the rules for you. So for the domain registrar, Beth called first. And was able to reset the password to something we knew. I was able to get in and found all of these 10 domains that he had up and running and was able to map them back to what was going on at the colo and figure out what was important that we had to keep going. And we found a couple things. Remember that Brothers Business I mentioned earlier, that website, that was being hosted here, and his email. Beth had a personal domain that was hosted at this as well. So did Michael. Along with a bunch of other stuff, we actually found some people who were hosting stuff there that we had to contact and get them to come get their stuff, basically, and take their boxes and shift their hosting to someplace else. That was an interesting and awkward conversation. Pardon me. But this was a huge find. So if you can, try to use one registrar because it makes life easier for those of us trying to clean up the mess. What we were able to do is then figure out what we wanted to shift. We took Beth's email off the server onto its own domain. We took the Brothers Business, one of their family members rebuilt the website someplace else. We repointed DNS to another web hosting provider, pulled email off, pointed it someplace else. Reason for all this, by the way, one thing I forgot to tell you guys is all this was expensive. And in a situation like that, we were trying to stop the bleeding. So there was a sense of urgency of getting this stuff shut down to get these bills to stop, right? As well as, just getting control over all this stuff. So this was probably about a month-long process to get all this figured out and shifted around and moved around. And then once we've moved everything we knew we could move, we just turned it off and see what was going to yell. Fortunately, nothing did. So we think we found and located everything. But the home infrastructure was a whole different story. Yeah, you got a question?
Yeah, do you consider, or do you have the capability to do passive monitoring of some of this stuff in the meantime to figure out what DNS requests might be going on?
Yeah, it's a good question. I talked to the colo about that. It was interesting because the colo, and the question was, did we have the capability of doing passive monitoring on the colo infrastructure to figure out what was going on there? The short answer is the colo did not. They had just gone through an acquisition and were just getting their monitoring stuff set back up because I sat with the colo guy and I'm like, great, you've got, I can't remember what the tool was. Let's go take a look at that because that was the exact idea we had. And we pounded on for an hour and couldn't get any data back. So yeah, that would have made perfect sense, but we just couldn't get it to go. And at that point, I had already gotten enough other progress elsewhere that I just kind of brute forced it, but that is a great idea. So the home infrastructure was a bigger mess. Michael was a little bit of an IT hoarder. In fact, I'm pretty sure we can start a museum with what's in his basement. The heat load from his basement was visible on satellites. In fact, we siphoned the heat off to feed one of the power plants. And here's the problem. We had no idea what any of it did. So again, I want you to look at these next pictures and forget you know anything about IT. This is just one of many shells of gear Mike got sitting around. We can all look at that and know what that is. Pretend you don't.
There you go.
This is about 10%. Think about this. You walk into your basement and you're like, Andy? Yeah.
Sounds like a problem for tomorrow.
Right, right. But you know, in a situation like that, you just want some sense of normalcy back. You know, and so I will tell you, we're still figuring this stuff out. This talk is not all about wins. We had some fails. We'll talk about the fails. So part of the problem that we ran into here is that we didn't know where any of the stuff was that you care about in a situation like this. Michael was a huge avid photographer. I went on one trip with him. He took over 2,800 pictures on that trip. Mind you, we were in a national park, it's what you do. We still don't know where those pictures are. It could have been on one of these servers. We're not sure. Okay? And we're not done yet, but we're going to talk about that. But at one point, after we knew we had figured out all the infrastructure that was necessary for functioning, we just said, shit, turn it off, see what happens. We didn't know what was interconnected with what. We didn't know what talked to what at the colo. We'd already had the colo shut down, so that's what we did. And at least to, you know, stop the heat load and turn off all the electrical draw and figure out where we were, the easiest thing to do was tear it back down to minimums and build it back up. And that's what we did. Michael also had, oh, hey, one more picture. Michael had a lot of Macs. He was a big Apple fan. And Apple's really, really secure if you set it up that way. Really secure. Which is great if you want to keep somebody from stealing your gear or breaking in. It really sucks when you're doing what I'm trying to do. So Michael had a MacBook Pro, had a Mac Mini, had a bunch of other stuff. I'm like, no problem. I'll just create the OS X install disk on USB. We'll have some dinner. I'll be into these in 10 minutes, and we'll have a nice old time, drink some wine. Here's all your stuff. Have a good day. So my girlfriend and I head on up to Beth's house, and they start making dinner, and I pull up my little handy-dandy hacking USB key, thinking I'm going to be the hero. And I boot up off it, and I go to reset the root password, and it goes, nope. What do you mean, no? Pound on it for a little bit, look at it a little more. Can't mount the hard drive. That's weird. Oh, Michael set up full disk encryption. That's lovely. All right. Anybody got an idea what the password is? Yeah, no, this is Michael. It was probably a 38,000 character password. Yeah. Yeah, seriously. Believe it or not, I tried stuff like that. ABC123 password, just for giggles. Okay, that sucks. However, Mac offers a recovery key option. It looks like an activation key for like Windows. It's a 16-digit or 12-digit character recovery key. Great. Let's see if we can find one of those. Couldn't. However, you can store the recovery key at apple.com. Excellent. We know, Beth had figured out, that Michael had used one of his own domains as his specific domain for registering to apple.com. I'm like, sweet, I'll spin that baby back up and I'll go do a restore at apple.com and change the password I'm in and see if he's got his recovery key there. Yeah, no. Again, Apple's really secure. So Apple does not recognize any right of survivorship, which, by the way, this is varied for all these different cloud domains and services. Apple pretty much says, we don't care, sorry. This is the way we are. It's not going to work. So we figured out that he was using mysecuritypartner.com as his email and got that spun back up, got it hosted on just a generic domain registrar provider, all good. Went to apple.com, said, hey, I forgot my password. They're like, great. What's your recovery key? Do you know? They said, no problem. You don't need a recovery key. You just got to be on a trusted device. Can't do that either. So at this point, they have this policy that you need at least 2 items for the 2-factor authentication Apple set up for recovery. Either your Apple ID password, access to a trusted device, or recovery key. I had none of those. So in this case, it was an epic fail. And this is still ongoing, by the way. We are still trying to figure it out. Our next attempt is going to be calling and playing the I'm a sad widow card. Yes, Phil?
Call the NSA.
Well, you know, I did. I did, and then a van showed up outside my house, and they weren't helpful. But I sent them a pizza. So this got into a lot of other sort of online services and how they work and what their policies are. And what I found throughout this process and doing some research for this talk, many different online services have highly varied policies when it comes to this. For instance, Google, and this is, wall of text, but it's actually a picture of a wall of text, so that's, breaking the rule. They basically say, hey, we recognize that if you don't know what to do, you can come and ask for information about somebody's account. And here's the various things you can do. By the way, you need a death certificate and all this other stuff and an ounce of blood in your firstborn, and fill out a form and we'll get back to you. We filled out that form 2 months ago. We have not heard from Google. So do not count on this working for you in a timely manner. And ultimately, what they probably would do is send you a DVD with some specific information you requested. They're not going to give you access to the account. They're not going to change the password to something you know. They say that explicitly. Oh, and they also say, by the way, this is an interesting counterpoint to Microsoft, if you happen to know the password of the account, you're not supposed to use it. That's against our policies. Microsoft, on the other hand, says, hey, if you know the password to the account and you're next to kin, rock on, have a nice day. So interesting comparison there. Google does have something interesting called the Inactive Account Manager, which is kind of some interesting voodoo. The concept of it is after a certain period of inactivity, you can trigger somebody to suddenly get access to your account or certain data of your account, or just being sent an email of, hey, I think I fell off the planet, you should check on me. And it's kind of odd because they don't exactly tell you how they do it, but how do they detect the lack of activity? They say, we look at several signals to understand whether you're still using Google accounts. And if you don't, after some random period of time, they will actually send to somebody you designate access to your stuff. So something to think about if you've got a lot of stuff on Google. Facebook actually has the most robust death policy. They have a couple different things. So first, they've got these memorialized accounts, which is kind of interesting. I will tell you, the older I get, and this is an obvious statement, but the older I get, the more people I know die. And it's really odd now running across their accounts online after they're dead. So what Facebook said is, hey, we know that this is sort of an online centralized gathering place, so we want to spin up this concept of memorializing their accounts. So it's sort of a virtual online mourning site, So you know, you can post things on these, you can share them, people can view them, but it doesn't appear in recommended friends, it doesn't appear in birthdays, it doesn't appear in ads, it doesn't appear in anything that looks like they're active. And no one can actually log into the account. The account itself is not actually a real account anymore. It's more just like a placeholder for their account. Anything they shared stays visible. There's no password though. And to do that, basically, Facebook has a form, and again, none of this is automated. This all goes to people who have to review it, so it's a slow process. The other option is, if you're next to kin, you can ask them to just delete the account immediately. So one of my takeaways for you guys is, you may want to talk about with your next of kin what you want to happen to your online stuff after you die. I know it sounds kind of morbid, but would you want to still be running around online afterwards? I guess that's something you need to decide. They have a third option, which is just kind of the legacy contact. And basically it's allow you to say, hey, this is my next of kin when it comes to my Facebook account. And you can also set and designate, hey, this is the person who gets to run this. And oh, by the way, the only thing I want them to do is clean up and delete my account, if you want. So Facebook actually has a pretty robust policy on this. Twitter apparently wants you to, get into a mortgage with them for everything they want to know about this. And your only option with Twitter really is just shut down the account. But again, you can see, I won't read all this. It's a pretty lengthy thing. And here's the other thing, because Twitter doesn't have a real name policy, they ask for a lot to try to prove that this is who you say it is. Next of kin process at Microsoft, and it's kind of all encapsulated in their Outlook.com, is pretty interesting. They're willing to send you a DVD with all their information. And again, it's not too bad. They want to know the typical stuff. But again, they're not typically going to grant you online access. They're not typically going to give you access to the password. But they say elsewhere, hey, if you have the password, just use that, because it's the same thing we're going to send you in DVD anyway. Again, countering that to Google saying, don't ever use it, even if you know it. You're not allowed that.
How would they know?
Well, they would. Yeah. So I'm actually getting through this talk quicker than I thought, but we'll have some good time for Q&A. So here's some overall lessons learned that I have found. And this is the first time I've presented this talk, so I apologize if it went a little too quick. But we really haven't caught up from a technical aspect on next of kin issues like we have from a physical property aspect. And we are certainly growing faster and faster online and doing more and more things. And things happen. And so I don't know that we as a society have really figured out how to deal with that in the event of a sudden death. The other thing that I learned through this process is that when you play the somebody died card, especially when you are an immediate family member, people inherently believe you. Beth got dozens of death certificates printed up and rarely had to show them. So if you're a social engineer, be nice. Don't use this. It's beyond the pale, unless you really, really have to. And then don't blame me. Very few companies, unless you're one of those online cloud providers, have a policy on this. It's interesting. They're not used to this concept of their customer suddenly dying, and they don't know what to do. So it becomes a very personal process to work with those companies and get somebody on their side to understand the situation and give a damn enough to help you. Most of them will, but it breaks their process. So a call center person is their head will explode. They have no idea. They just, please hold, and they never come back to you. They just don't know, right? It's too hard for them on $8 an hour to deal with. So typically you've got to go up. To get philosophical for a second, I personally feel that helping prepare our partners to deal with life after we're gone is a form of love. It's how we show them that we care. So I have some recommendations. And here's where I got some wall of text, and I apologize to Martin. First one is legacy drawer. I'm going to come back to that because I've got a whole slide on that. One that I'm a big believer in is switching roles in your household once a month, or for a month, once a year. The concept being that if you are the primary payer of bills and the primary person who calls on the cable bill or whatever it is, make sure the other person knows how to do that. Make sure they know how to shut off the gas. Make sure they know where the water valve is. Not only does it empower them, but it prepares them if something unfortunate were to happen. The next one that is so difficult for us as security people to embrace is you may want to seriously consider using a password vault or some sort of shared password credentialing system and make sure they have access to it. Now, if you're having an affair, this talk cannot help you.
Is that experience, Andy?
This talk cannot help you. Yeah.
Sealed envelope with the passwords in it.
Yes, and we'll talk about that in the legacy drawer. Absolutely, absolutely. The only problem I have with that is I change my passwords too often. Right, so I use one of the varied password managers online, and if I can give them the master password to it that I don't change as often in that sealed password, yes.
Paul gave me an iron key like 6 years ago.
Yeah?
I still use that. That's the main. That's my iron key.
Iron key? Great idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's another password inside of it, so it's kind of like double encryption.
Yeah, for those who couldn't hear Phil, he recommended an iron key, which is a little USB, has password vault inside of it, physical item, very good. Just don't have it on you during the crash.
Yeah, so once a week I'll go update it for her and I shove it back in the safe.
That's very good. That's good discipline.
And I had her open it up a couple times to use it. She couldn't do it the first 3 times.
Okay, so Phil just brought up a good point. Couldn't hear him. He had his partner try it. First 3 times she didn't know how. So it's good to test this stuff. This is outside the normal topic of this talk, but life insurance, guys. Here's the problem. Most of us get our life insurance through our company. Michael had just switched jobs. In circumstances like this, they being the financial services industry, 10 times your income to replace you financially. You make 100 grand, it's $1 million of insurance. Idea being that can be invested, you draw off 8% per year, and it replaces your income. We normally don't get that from our work. They normally do 1 or 2 times annual salary. Term life insurance is super cheap. You get it for 20, 30 years, 10 times, a couple $100 a year. The last thing your family needs to deal with at a time like this is financial issues. So I know it sucks. I know it's not fun. Nothing in this talk is fun, but it matters. Here's the other thing. If you have shared digital memories, store them someplace shared. Have a backup drive that both of you know how to get access to. We're still looking for Michael's photo archives. We don't know where they're at. We think they're on one of these full disk encrypted drives. And, that sucks. Phil.
I bet you should add simplify. Because I used to have racks in my house. I dumped all that for my wife. There you go.
Keep critical IT gear uncomplicated. We'll come back to that. Let's talk about the legacy drawer. I stole this from DaveRamsey.com. This is, in essence, where you want your family members to go when you're abducted by aliens. In it, you've got your wills and oh, you have a will, right? You don't have a will? Get a fucking will. Wills and estate plans, financial account info, the institution, the account number, the password. Funeral instructions. Do you want to do something important, different, weird? Whatever. Have your asses spread by a plane over your enemy's house. I don't know. That's where it should be. Insurance policies, important documents, tax returns, at least the last couple of years. If this is in a safe deposit box, at least point them to the safe deposit box with a key, passwords to your shared account manager, contact info for your lawyers, CPAs. Point being, everything that in a time of grieving they could go to and figure out how to keep running life. You want it in one spot. Now, this is a risk. Somebody gets a hold of this, identity theft is trivial, right? So you want to maybe put this in a fireproof safe in your house, that kind of thing. This is a balanced trade-off, guys. We're trying to balance usability of life after death with information security risk. So you got to figure out what works for you, but that's what I put in here. This is on daveramsey.com. I'll eventually publish these slides somewhere. I know it's a lot of text, yes?
This is exactly the gap that a certified financial planner would fill. If you don't have
Sure.
one, feel free to come out and talk to me afterwards. I've got
So you're a
contacts.
CFP?
No, my partner is.
Okay, great. So he's a CFP. He wants you to talk to him. Or his partner, sorry. Other recommendations. I meant to take a picture of my home IT and I forgot, I apologize. Make a simple little network map that somebody else created. Yes?
I wanted to say for a safety deposit box,
Yeah.
if you add other individuals to the safety deposit box, at least in my experience, it's much easier to get access to those as opposed to like being an executive.
That's a great point.
So,
Absolutely. I don't know if everybody heard that, but for a safety deposit box, if you add an authorized access holder, they have a much easier job getting access to that safety deposit box than executor, next of kin, that sort of thing. So very good point. Label your gear. We're all anal, aren't we? OCD, or is that just me? Put a little label on, this is the router, this is the switch, this is the firewall. It really helps. It also helps, by the way, when you're traveling and something's broken and your girlfriend's calling you saying, what do I reboot? Say, the one that says router, okay, that helps. Keep your critical IT gear at home uncomplicated. As Phil was saying, yeah, we all love having racks and racks and racks of gear, and you can do that, but make that all lab gear if you can. If you live with other people, this is all predicated on the concept that you have a partner, right? If you don't, I'm sorry, and there's online dating sites that you can peruse. Maybe that will help. If not, try to keep your home IT gear uncomplicated so that it's fixable by others. On a serious note, you know, our time here is unknown. Make your time here worth it. You don't know what's going to happen. You know, Michael was a phenomenal guy, and I remember Michael not for the toys he had or the stuff he bought. Not that there's anything wrong with that, believe me, I like toys. But I remember for the things he did, the things he experienced, and the contributions he made to the stuff he cared about. Right? And you know, frankly, I don't care if he did stuff that other people valued. What I thought most resonated is what he did and the stuff that he valued and that he was passionate about. So, you know, one thing this experience has taught me is that our time is unknown and it's finite. So this isn't dress rehearsal. This is it. So try to make it worth it. You know, and ultimately talk to your partner about death. It's a terrible topic. Nobody wants to talk about it. And it's not fun. I know, all you guys are glum. Don't worry, we're going to head back up in a second here. We're almost done. But let them know what you want. Let them know what you care about. Let them know what you would want to have happen after they're gone. You know, finally, this is, you know, as I said, what we got, this opportunity. So make it worth it. This is some stuff that can really help your loved ones in the event something unfortunate were to happen. I never wanted to go through this process. I'm sure Beth didn't. But I'm hoping that sharing this with you guys is somewhat useful. I know a lot of us will go, yeah, it's a great idea, and then we're going to get home, and something's going to be on TV, or we're going to get into a video game, and we're not going to do this. But try to do this. Even if you only get 10% of it, you're better off. So, with that, any questions? This is Michael. I know I bummed you guys all out. All right, no questions. One last thing I want to say. We have a special guest who helped me with this. Beth is here. Beth, you just want to stand up or wave? This is Beth Hamelin. All right, I know it's a weird talk, not your typical thing. I do want to thank B-Sides for letting me do this. And if you guys want to talk offline about any of this, I'm happy. I'll be at the after party drinking heavily. And thanks. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.